I'm really excited to get into these introductions and share with you who is going to be taking us through this conversation about moving from a corporate role into entrepreneurship. First, I'm excited to introduce Gladys Castro. Gladys is a business credit advisor with over 8 years of experience. She has helped hundreds of entrepreneurs launch and expand their business by helping them access capital, including loans. She loves to work with entrepreneurs in both English and Spanish. Hi, Gladys.
Hi, everyone. Great to meet you all.
It is so wonderful to have you here. And next we have Jessie Armenta. Jessie is a dynamic entrepreneur who at 43 has transitioned from a successful 13-year career in corporate management at Toyota Motor Sales, North America, to fulfilling their lifelong dream of entrepreneurship. After careful deliberation, they launched a cafe in 2019, which 2020 was a big year of change for everyone. And since then, they have expanded into food and catering despite the challenges that the pandemic brought on. Their journey is marked by resilience and adaptability and is a testament to the spirit of entrepreneurship. Jessie, we're so excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. All right, so we have so many good questions and things to get through. So I'm just going to jump right into it. And Jessie, I would love to start with you. What was the pivotal moment or key motivation for you to transition from corporate to entrepreneurship?
It's a journey personally that I always knew I would take. Ever since I was a kid, I can remember actually the moment I heard the word entrepreneur and asked the people at the table what that word meant. And I knew that someday I was going to be that, even though I didn't fully know what it was. So yeah, I just always knew I'd be a business owner. But I knew that there were some steps I needed to take before I made that leap. Nobody in my family had been one, so I didn't really have any kind of a playbook or any kind of guidelines to go by. So I was lucky enough to get a great job working for Toyota. I did that for, as you said, 13 years. And got to the point in my career where I had to make some decisions on whether I was going to continue my career there. And at that point, it meant moving out of the state of Illinois to pursue sort of the next level role. And I thought, okay, this is if ever there was a time to make the decision to become a business owner, an entrepreneur, now's that time. And so, I just took the leap and said, I'm gonna leave my corporate career and I'm going to go figure out what's next, and gave myself a little bit of runway to figure that out. It was originally a year, which turned into 3 years. I do not recommend people do it that way. It was a tumultuous time for sure. But here we are, and things are motoring along, and I would say growing. And that's, I think, as an entrepreneur, you have to have different sort of pinpoints of what success looks like. It's not always profit. Sometimes it's just, movement forward. So I'd say we're moving forward. Opening a cafe during COVID was not the easiest thing, but it's certainly been a great learning process on my entrepreneurial journey. So that's a long way of answering your question, but kind of always knew I'd be here, and just didn't know what form that would take.
Yes, I really appreciate your story and talking about there was kind of this two-path opportunity where you're going to stay on the path or where you going to go towards your dream of doing this. And so I think that's really inspirational, and I appreciate you sharing it with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and Gladys, as a coach, so I know you meet with tons of entrepreneurs. What do you see as the pivotal moment or key motivation from your clients who make this transition from corporate to entrepreneurship?
Sure, yeah. Many of my clients I work with reach the pivotal moment when they feel confident in their business. And me being on the more cautious side, I also encourage my clients to have everything aligned so they are in a confident place to start their business. So for some clients, this means working their full-time or part-time jobs while they launch. And for others, this means going all in, right? Like taking that decision, taking that leap, and leaving their job. So if you're getting ready to make that decision, I encourage you to take a hard look at the vision you have for your business, your skills, and your financial situation. If these align, great. And if not, what can you change now to be better prepared to launch in the future? You also want to make sure you can limit your outside distractions as much as you can, so you can dedicate your time and focus on your business. For some, this may mean having enough savings to hold them over for X amount of months, and for others, it means having, a certain amount of clients, so they feel confident, right, and in their launch. So figure out what these needs are and what these priorities are for you, so you can give 100% to your business. And of course, always keeping the why in mind with every decision you make, right? Why are you starting your business? What's the long-term goal? And I think being well prepared and keeping your why in mind can create that pivotal moment to help you launch.
Yeah, that is so key in having that why as a cornerstone, because entrepreneurship starts as like a little seed, right? And then how do you make that jump? Those are great sides of that. Okay, so moving forward, Jesse, reflecting on your corporate experience, what specific skills have you found most valuable in your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, so great question. So working at Toyota, sort of the way the company is structured is you're kind of structured as a generalist, meaning that you're constantly moving from different management roles, learning the sort of the breadth of the company and all the things that it does, and sort of how you can affect change and efficiencies. And I would say it was hard to see at the time, but what really I was learning, the skill that I was learning is managing multiple different things at the same time. And that could not be more true than when you're an entrepreneur, right? You're everything from the bottle washer to the bathroom cleaner to the CEO to the accountant to you're managing all of these things, and you almost have to make sure you're comfortable with a constant level of being uncomfortable, right? If you're one of those people that everything has to be perfect all the time, that can get you in trouble really quickly in entrepreneurship, because sometimes 80% is the best you can do right now. So you do 80% in that thing, and then you kind of switch your mind over to doing another task that's, equally as important. So being able to have multiple balls in the air at the same time and not beating yourself up for the need to be perfection, more about, like I was saying before, is just moving forward and continuing the momentum, not getting lost in the details. And I think corporate America, particularly at my company, taught me that pretty well, in that, you have to be able to multitask all the time. So that's a huge one. But also I think leadership was really important in making sure that sort of your North Star as a manager is the people who work for you. And as an entrepreneur, that's another thing that couldn't be more important, particularly when you're customer facing. I can't always be there. And so my employees are the face of my business when I'm not there. And I truly believe that the way you treat your employees are the way they'll treat your customers. And so if you can make sure that you're leading by example and you're doing everything, not perfect, because perfect doesn't exist, but you're truly doing your best and you're learning from every single challenge and passing that on to your employees, I think it'll truly serve you well over time. And so for me, whenever something happens, I always try to reflect on, could I have done it better? And if so, sort of taking notes to make sure that when that comes up again, I've learned from everything that I've done up to that point. So I would say those are two big ones: being able to multitask, and then leadership, I think, is really, really huge. And that's true whether it's 5 employees or 500.
Oh my gosh, I totally agree. And I think many people really resonate with the fact that when you get started as an entrepreneur, you're doing all of the things, you're wearing all of the hats. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, you have been promoted, right? You are making coffee, you're the janitor, you
Yeah.
are the manager, you're doing it
Yeah.
all. And so understanding that those skills that served you so well in your corporate job, they can be transitioned. And I also really love what you said about changing kind of your perspective for your employees and understanding that it's different now, but you can still use those same skills.
Yeah, I think so. I think being like sort of that servant leader mentality, again, especially when you're customer facing, at the end of the day, right? I think it's important in any leadership role, but particularly when you're trying to show them how they should be treating the people who are, spending their money with you, which is an honor. There are lots of places they can go spend their money. It doesn't have to be with you. That you sort of you respect that. And so giving that to the employee, I think, is the best way. It doesn't always land. And you have to, as an owner, you have to not let that change you, and know that, there are just some people it's not going to get through to, and that's okay. But keep making sure that you're the ideal, if you will, in the organization.
Love that. Leading by example. I love that. Okay, Gladys, based on your experience, what's a common challenge your clients face when transitioning from entrepreneurship, and how do you advise them to overcome that challenge for those challenges?
For me, two really come to mind. The first is not being well prepared and organized, and the second is not having enough funding to help you launch your business. To overcome these challenges, I recommend you create a business plan with enough detail to help you plan out your business in the short term and in the long term, right? So creating an action plan can help you get there too. You can even use a calendar to keep yourself accountable by scheduling working times, due dates, content creation ideas, things like that, right? So whatever works for you, whatever will keep you constant with that. And then funding is also a challenge for a lot of people who are just getting started. And knowing how much money you need and having a specific number in mind could help you find the funding that is right for you. Because not all funding will be right for you or for your business, right? Some loans are the right way, some of them are looking for investors or grants. And so finding the right funding for you is very important. So if you're looking for a business loan, I encourage entrepreneurs to connect with lenders ahead of time so you know exactly what the lenders are looking for before you need the actual loan. So things like making sure your credit is strong, knowing what your capacity is, how much you can afford to pay monthly, things like that, right? And also knowing how much of your own savings you're going to use. So for example, one of my clients was looking for $100,000 and he was looking for a $100,000 loan. And after he did some research, he realized that his monthly payments would be around $3,500 a month, which was too expensive for him. So he adapted his budget to get a loan that he could afford without obtaining more debt than he could handle, right? And here at AOF, we actually have a business coaching hub where you can meet one-on-one with a business coach who can help you with both of those things. And of course, all aspects of your business. So if funding is one of the things that you're worried about, come talk to us. We're happy to chat.
Yes, I love that, those two perspectives, and thinking about funding, how much debt can you take on, and getting ahead of it, right? Like having an understanding before you just jump fully in, is really, really helpful. And thank you for the shout out for the coaching hub. For those of you who don't know, Gladys is one of our coaches and credit advisors. So obviously she's amazing. So if you're looking for some one-on-one tailored support, you can check out that link and get some support in a bunch of different areas. But yes, getting started and planning is one of the key pieces that we help entrepreneurs with. So Jesse, I would love to ask you this because Gladys has given us some really important information about funding and how it's important. And money is a huge piece to the entrepreneurial journey. But I was wondering, from your perspective, what are a few other things you think an entrepreneur can focus on if they maybe aren't ready or are overwhelmed by the thought of money right now?
Yeah, and I think Gladys did a great job of sort of laying out really a sort of structured plan for even your thoughts and ideas, right? Before way ahead of the point at which you'll need money, you should probably really start thinking about your idea. What problem are you trying to solve, right? I think a lot of times people confuse passion with business. And just because you're passionate about something doesn't necessarily mean that anybody needs that thing, right? So really focusing on what the business plan looks like and who's your customer, what service are you providing, what hole are you filling? Those are all things and questions that require time and deliberation well before you'll ever need the money. So to Gladys's point, you'll get to the money part. The money part is very important. I don't want to in any way diminish how important the money piece is, but it's almost I would say it's a step much further down the line than people realize. Often I think people get discouraged by the idea of, well, I don't have any money. I don't have any, too much savings to speak of. I can't even dream about an idea. And I would say that if you're passionate about entrepreneurship, that's maybe not the best way to look at it. Maybe you should, spend a little bit more time in the dreaming phase. And you probably don't hear too many entrepreneurs talk about that, but I think the dreaming phase is really important because it starts to sort of waking up all the things in you that could possibly form around a really good business idea, right? It all starts with dreaming. So do that. Once you kind of land on something, to Gladys's point, start getting it down on paper. Start spending time writing a business plan and just seeing what materializes for you. That's even before you get into truly sitting down and with coaches, right? So that you kind of have a really solidly formed idea and strategy in your head. And then someone like Gladys could probably help you really streamline that. But I would say also even before you get to the coaching aspect of it, I would say get yourself in community with other entrepreneurs. And it's one of the things that I really wish I had done. I also wish I had talked to Gladys earlier too, but here we are. But getting in community with entrepreneurs, and I've heard from friends, other entrepreneurs who say the same thing. I say that, gosh, I really wish I knew you guys when I was starting this. And so, the common theme or thread is I just don't have those kinds of friends. We're all 9-to-5 folks, we're all corporate folks. Or, the friends I do have, know who have businesses, they've had it for 20 years. They really can't help me with my idea. Well, I would push back on that argument and say, if you really want to be an entrepreneur, first of all, it's really hard. So you're going to have to go out and do hard things. And that means walking into your local coffee shop and asking if the owner is there. And, I guarantee you 100 out of 90, 99 out of 100 would take the time to chat with you. And before you know it, you'll make connections like that, and you will have grown a community of people that you can bounce questions off of, ideas off of, ask about real estate advice, ask about accounting. Should I get an accountant, and when should I get an accountant? Should I have a lawyer, and when should I have a lawyer? These kinds of questions that you should be asking yourself well before you even get to the funding part of it, so that when you do get to the funding part of it, you have a solid strategy as to why you need every dollar on that paper and where it's going to go.
Yes, such a good point, to spend some time in the dreaming phase, in like the foundation phase, meeting some other entrepreneurs and getting out there. And I do think, to your point of, going and asking for support and finding local entrepreneurs, we have heard a lot that entrepreneurship can feel very lonely. And
Yeah.
so they might be thankful that you have come and asked them. So I think that's an excellent point.
Yeah, and I would also say to the people who are hesitant to do that, don't understand you're also providing value. At least I would say that when people ask me questions about my journey, it gives me time to stop and think about the things that I've done. And that's inspiring in its own in its own way. Sometimes you get so busy doing this thing you're doing, you've forgotten about all the accomplishments that you have already accomplished. And so I think that's something you're giving back to the entrepreneur. And it helps them to think critically so that they can give you good advice. And that's helpful in their businesses. Even the conversations I've had with you in the last few days have really reminded me of some of the stuff that I've learned on this journey and that I'm now able to share. And, there isn't anybody I wouldn't stop and spend 5 minutes chatting with if they so asked me to, or give them my contact information so that if they did have questions down the road, I'd be happy to answer. And I'm very sure all of my entrepreneur friends would say the same thing.
Yes, I love that. I love that. Okay, so another key piece is, the stability of a corporate job to the uncertainty of entrepreneurship, which is huge. That's a really big hurdle. So, Jesse, I would love to start with you, and then Gladys, I'll kick it to you. But how do you recommend individuals prepare for the shift from the stability of corporate to maybe the uncertainties of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big one. I think organization is a big piece of it. And, to my earlier point and Gladys's earlier point, being really organized with what money you have, what money you need, and what you're going to do with that money. And the other piece of that is having some contingency, right? I always I always joke that everything costs twice as much as you think it's going to cost, and it's going to take twice as long. And that has pretty much proven to be true for me in all the things I've done, whether it's, buying a condo or whatever it is I've done, it's always been more than I had budgeted for. And starting this business has been no different. And, yes, we had an extra layer of complexity opening during COVID. So even the runway we had ran out pretty quickly. And so, that piece of it leads me to the point where you can only prepare so much, right? And so, being as organized and prepared is key. You should absolutely do that, but also understand that entrepreneurship, certainly in the early days, will never provide you the same security as a corporate job. It is just a different animal altogether. And so you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And for some people really love that feeling of exhilaration, right? Not knowing what tomorrow is going to bring. And most of us are somewhere in the middle, right? I'd like to know how my rent is going to get paid. I'd like to know that kind of stuff. I don't need to know a whole year out, but I'd at least like to know I can lay my head somewhere for the next, few months. But I say all that to say that, planning is important, having all of that written down, speaking to a financial advisor, knowing where all your dollars are going to go, making sure you have a contingency plan, but also know that you may run through that contingency plan way faster than you planned for. And so being able to think quickly on your feet, reach out to the resources out there, because they're out there, and Accion is one of them. There are grants for small businesses. Talk to your accountant. Don't skimp on an accountant. Spend money on an accountant. There are things early in your journey that you can save money on. Account is not one of them. Because they can give you so much insight into the tax code, what benefits you qualify for. That could almost be like an infusion of cash, right? What you're able to write off on your taxes from when you had a corporate job, that's money, that's real money you get back that you could put into your business. So I can talk about that forever, but I would say those are really high level, great things to be thinking about.
Yeah, those are excellent points, and kind of balancing, like, you'll have some uncertainty, but
Yeah.
you can get some people to build some foundations around you, like accountants and whatnot.
Yeah.
Gladys, I'd love to ask you the same question. Since you work with tons of entrepreneurs, how do you recommend those entrepreneurs prepare from that shift of the stability of corporate to those uncertainties of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I agree with everything Jesse said. Owning a business is tough, and unless you're a fortune teller, there really is no way to predict everything that will happen with your business, right? Both good and bad. So what I've learned from my clients is that you really have to be prepared to adapt. Your business will have its ups and downs, and the best thing to do is plan ahead as best as you can, right? And like Jesse mentioned, some of these things are going to go as you plan, and some of them are not. But the more you can plan, I think the better. And one way to do this is to know your industry in and out. So stay up to date with the trends and other factors that may affect it, and figure out things like its busy times, its slow times, things like that, so you can plan around these things. If you're still trying to figure these things out, it's okay to take some time to do your own market research while you have the financial stability of a corporate job, or that stability, right? But of course, adapt as you grow. If financial stability is what scares you the most, I recommend you create a budget for every aspect of your business and of your personal life, right? So creating like a marketing budget, a budget for like seeking help, right? For hiring an accountant, like Jesse mentioned, or for taking certain classes or courses, whatever it is that you may need, but budget everything in there. And of course, having a few months of savings can also help make that transition more comfortable, as it may relieve some of that financial stress. So again, it just goes back to, where are you at, right? Are things aligning for you? How much savings do you have? How much can you actually spend on launching this business? And I also recommend that you keep tabs of your cash flow as consistently as you can, right? You don't need to have a financial, or excuse me, a fancy accounting system to help you figure out how much money is coming in and out, but you have to find a system that works for you and that will keep you consistent. So if it's, meeting with an accountant once a month, or my mom is an entrepreneur, she sits down every single day at the end of the night and does her books on an actual journal. But that works for her, right? Because she's been having a business for 30 years. So before even QuickBooks was a thing online. So whatever keeps you consistent is really what's gonna help you with that transition. And again, like planning ahead, creating these budgets, and sticking to them as much as you can, so you know that every single cent will go.
Yes, I love that. I love that your mom's like the OG of keeping track of her books. And what I heard in that was that she is consistent, so she knows she's going to sit down and do it. And then having an understanding, like, what is my appetite? Like, am I going to be, as diligent as Gladys's mom? I feel like I would say no. So let me sign up for an accountant or QuickBooks. So just trying to build in those pieces to keep you organized, like you said, is so key. And also, I just want to pause here. In about 20 minutes, we'll probably get into our live Q&A. So if you have questions, please go ahead and start dropping those in the chat. If we have specific resources to share with you, we'll share those, but we're gonna do a couple of questions live. All right, so Jesse, this next question is for you. I'm sure there are many options you can pick from, but can you share a significant challenge you faced in your early days of entrepreneurship and how you dealt with it?
Yeah, you said we only have how much time do we have? No, I will. I'll share the one that's I think most significant, and they're all pretty significant. But this one's big to me because people are important to me. It's part of why I started a business, not just to make a business for myself, but to provide employment for people and a good work environment. That's something that's very important to me. I learned that at Toyota. Toyota's a great place to work. They take very good care of their employees, and it was something that I hold as a core value for myself. But I will say that I grossly underestimated the amount of work it takes to be that good boss all the time, right? Because you can't have a bad day in front of your employees. That's something that unfortunately you have to do at home. You have to, to the best of your ability, right? Especially if that's a core value of yours. If you want to make sure that people, right? Because your baristas, your cooks, they don't want to hear about your bad day, right? They don't want to hear about how you're struggling. That's not why they're there. They're there for a job, and they've got their own stuff going on. And so for me, it's important to make sure I make the experience as good as possible, particularly if they're good workers, and so they can stay. For me, transitioning from corporate America to a cafe was just the employment is different. The employees are different. The people that I worked with at Toyota, they're looking for different kind of advancement. A lot of times in a cafe, you have great, wonderful people, but they're in college and they have a time frame. They're not going to stay with you forever. Or you've got, they're just a very different employees, and they have to be handled differently. And especially if you want them to have a good experience and you want them to stay as long as possible, but also support them when it's time for them to make their transition. And so I think that personally, I underestimated what that undertaking was going to look like. And as Gladys said, entrepreneurship is hard. It's really, really hard, even outside of those things, right? So that piece of it was a bigger job for me than, and continues to be, than I even anticipated. But with that comes great reward. And I would say the great reward in that is I have learned so much about what it means to be a good boss, but more importantly, I've learned so much about myself. And so while it's been an incredibly challenging process to get right, I'm grateful that I've gone through it and that I can handle each situation better each time. So I would say for me personally, that's been the I mean, putting COVID aside, putting all of that aside, this was something that I thought that, that I really didn't even plan for. I just thought I had, right? So throw in all the other crazy stuff, and then, this one over here is going crazy too. So that's the one that I would use.
Yeah, excellent perspective too. Like you said, it's just a different beast than the
Yeah.
normal folks that you had worked with before. And I think that your perspective of embodying like really good servant leadership and being there for your employees, I think it comes through naturally, but you just had to make that transition mentally
Yeah.
to be like, oh yeah, people are gonna leave, I guess.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And what it means to be a good boss in a corporate structure to what it means to be a corporate boss as an entrepreneur and, in my instance, a cafe owner are two different things.
yeah,
And I
100.
just wasn't, I wasn't prepared, or as prepared as I thought I was.
Totally understand. Okay, so Gladys, when entrepreneurs are looking at crafting this transition plan, what are some key components that should not be overlooked?
I feel like I can't emphasize about this enough about the business plan itself. When I think about a transition plan, I really think about creating a good business plan to guide you. So that's the one component that shouldn't be overlooked. Having a business plan with all three components, which is, the business planning and legal side, the marketing side, and the financial side, can help make sure that you're not overlooking any details. So I encourage you to do lots of research to make sure you have the right business entity for you, the right permits, the right insurance, and things like that to make sure that you and your business are well protected, especially if you own property, right? Like if you own your own house, you just want to make sure that you're protected. I also recommend developing a marketing plan ahead of time so you know where you can find your ideal clients and where they can find you, right? So having a marketing plan is going to be super important to get your business out there. And so I definitely recommend having that planned out. And then of course, having this planned out can help relieve some of that stress of not knowing how to get your business out there. And lastly, having that financial plan in place, creating budgets, knowing how much money you need to be bringing in monthly to cover your business and your personal expenses, things like that. So knowing all of these numbers will really help you in that transition. And of course, being realistic and adaptable will really help you in this transition. We all want to make our dollar, $1 million in our first year of business, but it's not the reality for a lot of entrepreneurs. And I see Jesse smiling at that, right? So profit should not be your driving force, right? And so I always tell my clients, remember your why. Why are you doing this in the first place? And remember that your business plan should be a living document that you create and update as you grow and learn, right? Because there's going to be tons of changes in your business. And as long as you have something that keeps guiding you, it's going to make that transition a lot smoother.
Oh, so many good tips in there. And I love how you talked about maybe taking some time and planning out marketing strategies, all those things that are in your business plan, spending some time to kind of help you ease into that. Yes, I would, if I started a business, I would love to make $1 million in the first year too. I love that. But having that plan and having the people to support you can at least, help you move through it. Okay, so if you are in the audience and you have questions, please go ahead and start dropping those into the chat. We've gotten a few already, but let's get into our last structured question of the day. And Jesse, I'd love to start with you. Could you offer one or two actionable tips or pieces of advice for our audience members who are thinking about making the transition but might still have reservations?
Yeah, and I think Gladys has touched on a lot of these already. I think, having a truly airtight business plan, and I think part of having that airtight business plan is having done the research, right? Having, getting yourself into community with other entrepreneurs, as I mentioned before. But if possible, and this is a mistake I think that I made that I would have learned tremendously from, is to have gotten a job in the field that I am looking to open a business in.
Yeah.
You know, I mean that, you know, it sounds pretty intuitive, but you know, I can raise my hand and tell you, I'm the person that opened a coffee shop who had never worked in food service before. And while my corporate and accounting skills and my ability to write a business plan, all of that worked in my favor, and we're still here, thank God. Had I spent 6 months or a year working in a cafe, I think would have taught me a lot of sort of nuanced things that you can't really even plan for as a business owner. And so I've had to learn those on the fly. So I say that to say I could have made it a lot easier for myself. And I think one of the big parts of entrepreneurship is doing your best to reduce friction, right? Because you're going to have problems, concerns, things are going to come up, but how do you mitigate those, or how do you lessen those? By planning, right? By having a plan, by referencing that plan, right? It's one thing to have a plan, but if you don't refer back to that plan and use that plan as sort of your goalpost, it's gonna, you know, you're gonna pivot along the way. You're gonna adjust it, you're gonna improve it, because you're gonna know more, you're gonna learn more. But to use that as a living, breathing document along the way, I think is key. But for, like, you know, and again, I can only speak through the lens of my experience. It would have been tremendously useful to have spent some time in the service that I was looking to provide. No amount of research could have prepared me better, I think, than having actually gone out and done it. And so I think that, you know, again, having, you know, the two things be have a very solid plan, do your best to reduce friction. And that's, you know, reducing friction is by knowing hands-on what it is you're taking on. And then getting in community with people who can have these types of conversations with you and share with you their insights. And it's not always going to apply to you, but you can take that information and then filter it through what you're trying to accomplish. And there's always value. So I would say those are the two big things that are top of mind for me, as takeaways that you can do to set yourself up for success. And then also, I mean, I think maybe the one thing I'd also leave you with, and Gladys touched on this, is tempering your expectations. Because Rome wasn't built in a day, right? And just because you need to make $100,000 that doesn't mean that you will, right? You need all the facts that support making that $100,000, right? So your customers don't care that you know what your bills are. So you need to have done the work to say, okay, if I hit all these targets, then I'll get to that number that I'm saying that I need. But the reality is there's going to be things along the way that are going to be pulling you back, pulling you to the side. And so being realistic in what you feel like you can accomplish in the first year, in the first 5 years, and in the first 10 years. And I've heard it said that people way overestimate what they can do in the first year and way underestimate what they can do in 10 years. So stick to it, keep moving forward, you know, adjust what your definition of success is. Are you moving forward? Is it growing? Is it doing the things that you want to do? Okay, then maybe the number might not match where you want it to be. But if you keep doing what you're doing, the growth becomes exponential at some point. And, you know, yeah, and I would say I can truly say that from experience. And, you know, it's tough along the way, but you're going to learn a ton. And in that learning, you shed off some of the resistance, and your train starts to move a lot faster. So be easy on yourself, give yourself time, be as structured as you can, but also be as flexible as you can.
There's on you. So many good tips in there, especially the one about working in the industry you want to go into. I can imagine that provides so much information, and it's not something I would have thought about either.
Me either. So
Yeah.
it seems so intuitive now.
Yeah.
Like, duh, you should probably work in a cafe before you own one. But, you know, it didn't. I guess clearly I wasn't that intuitive.
Hindsight, you know, but
2020. It's
yeah.
2020.
For those folks who are here in this, you know, thinking about making this jump, you heard it here first, so maybe that can inspire your next step. And Gladys, same question for you. Can you offer one or two actionable pieces of advice for our audience members who they're thinking about making the transition, but they still have reservations?
Sure. I think the first is to create an action plan. So what an action plan is just mapping out your next steps, right? And like you're marking your priorities, figuring out what next step you need to take to reach towards that goal. So if your goal right now is leaving your job, how much, when do you have to launch your business by if you haven't already? How much savings do you have to have saved? Like planning all of these things out are really gonna help you. So what I encourage all my clients to do is create an action plan, and just picking a couple of priorities. So pick priority number one, for example, could be finding the right time to leave, right? And then what actions you need to take. What are some challenges that are coming with that step? So actions could be something like, in 0 to 3 months, maybe transition to a part-time position so that I can focus more time on the business. Or it also could mean things like saving certain amount of money or finding X amount of clients, things like that. So creating that action plan, I think, can really help you take that next step. And then the second one is, of course, talk to a business coach. And I also I recommend 1,000% everything Jesse said, right? But talk to a business coach because an outside perspective can really help you figure out your next steps. They may pose questions that you have never thought about before and could help you look at any challenges that you may have from a new perspective. So, schedule your appointment today. Take advantage of the fact that AOF and other programs like AOF have these coaching hubs that are here to help you. So I think those are my biggest two tips, right? Create an action plan so you have something to stick to that will help you figure out your next steps, and talk to a business coach, someone that you can meet with regularly or maybe once, however often you need it, so that they can provide that support so that you don't feel alone.
Yes, love that. We just dropped in the chat the link to schedule your free coaching session. So if you are at that stage and want to talk to someone, that sounds like a good piece for you, you can schedule your appointment there. Okay, so we've got some really good questions in the chat. So I'm just going to start going through them, and we'll see how many we can get to. Okay, so first, this is a more like practical question, and Gladys, I'd love to start with you. How many months of savings should an entrepreneur have, or how can they determine that number?
Sure, and I would actually love to hear that answer from Jesse as well, since he's a living entrepreneur. But for me, what I would recommend is finding that right amount for you, right? So if you're giving yourself 6 months to find, the 10 clients you need to keep yourself afloat and make enough money to run your business and keep your personal life afloat too, then 6 months is the amount of time you need. But I think it really needs to be something that feels comfortable for you. So if you're as cautious as I am, maybe you need a year, right? And not just 6 months. And then that's why I really recommend that you create a budget for your personal and your business expenses so that you know exactly how much money you're going to need. But I'll pass it to Jesse.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I don't, there's no magic answer. If I had gotten the question first, I probably would have said the same as Gladys. And in fact, I want to say we were right around 6 months as well. May have been closer to 8 months, mainly because we were in the construction process of the cafe when COVID hit. And so we pulled back on some of the design stuff that we had planned to do, so that we would have more runway, and we burned through that quicker than I expected as well. So I'm glad we did that. But yeah, I would say 6 months is it also depends. Is your business already generating revenue, right? Do you already have clients? It depends on a lot of factors, but I do think that 6 months is a solid, safe number to go with. A year is not, I wouldn't blush at that. I think, if you can afford to have a year, that's fantastic. But I will also say, and Gladys touched on this, I kept my personal finances completely separate, and I planned to not pay myself for at least the first year. And here we are, 3.5 years in, and effectively I still haven't taken a paycheck, but I planned for that. I knew that worst case scenario happening, as long, my goal was to get the business to a profitable point where I can continue to invest in the business and I can grow the business so that at some point I can start taking a paycheck for myself. But that wasn't my priority, because in setting myself up for business, I made sure that I had personal runway, and that my personal living situation and my food and all of that was not contingent on my business. And I guess that was I'm not typically a super cautious person, but I am cautious when it comes to being able to sleep somewhere and eat at night. Those things were pretty important. So I did keep the two things separate. But yeah, I think Gladys said it perfectly. 6 months to a year is great. And if you can keep your personal finances, you can keep yourself in a position where you don't need the business to necessarily do anything. And I say that with the caveat that you may set for yourself in a year, if it isn't doing X, then I'm going to move on. That's something different.
Mm.
But to say it needs to be making me X, Y, and Z puts you in sort of I think it puts you in a more perilous situation, from a decision-making perspective. You might make decisions that are not necessarily best for the business because you need it to do something. And so if you can put yourself in a place where, your personal life is kind of taken care of for a bit, I think it sets you up for success a little bit better.
Yeah, those are excellent points. Oh, Gladys, did you have something to add?
Oh, I was just gonna say absolutely. And not being able to pay yourself, I think works for some people, but for some it doesn't. So you also have to find that balance for you, because I unfortunately have had some entrepreneurs that grew resentful of their business because they weren't able to, pay their rent and feed themselves and all of that. With their business. So it just has to be something that works for you. And I think that's why there's really no magic answer. But as long as your personal expenses are taken care of, and you have that budget and you make that plan for yourself, I think you'll be okay.
Yes, I love that. It's kind of like you have to determine your own appetite for risk, and then maybe schedule a session with a coach or someone to help you figure out what that actually looks like for you and your life, and also your type of business, because those are different as well. Okay, so this question, I'm going to start with Jesse. What are some practical steps you can take to start exiting your current corporate position if you're already starting to see the need to leave soon because your business is growing?
I think maybe I need you to clarify that question for me. Like, as far as do you mean like with your employer, or I'm
Yes.
not, yeah, maybe give me some,
Absolutely. I think this person is saying that they have started their business
yeah,
simultaneously as working in their corporate America job, and their business is growing, and so it's requiring more time from them. So
yeah.
they're wondering how they can step back from corporate.
Yeah, that makes more sense. I think I think it really depends on the situation. If if you can hire somebody for that job and it's less than what you're making, if you can keep onto your job a little bit longer and you can hire out whatever it is that's required at the business for the growth, that would be my personal choice, particularly if I've decided to do that strategy of straddling keeping my job and starting my business. If the benefit to the business is that you're doing those tasks or you're spending time on those things, and you can pay yourself enough to put yourself in a position where it may not be what you were making before, but you can see down the road that, okay, if I come and do this thing, it's going to pay me back in dividends down the road, and I can live on less for 6 months, a year, 2 years. Right. So it's a deeply personal question. It's hard to answer in specifics, but I would say, what I would assess first and foremost is, can I hire out this whatever this task is that's requiring attention, and can I do it for less than I'm making in my business? And if the answer, is yes or no, then you continue down the decision tree for yourself. But that would be my advice.
Yeah, excellent advice. Gladys, anything to add?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with Jesse. And then for some other people, I know leaving their job could also mean like losing your health insurance, or other benefits like that. So I think just whatever makes sense for you. It could also be that you go part-time, or that you take on your role as an independent contractor if you can, right? So I think, like Jesse said, it's a very personal decision, but I think you just have to outweigh what are the priorities for you.
Yes, excellent point. You can see all of these are very personal. And so, you know, as much advice as Gladys and Jesse can offer, we really encourage you to kind of look at some of the other resources and, you know, garner help and support where you might need for your specific situation. Gladys, this question is, I'm going to kick it to you. Some business plans have one page templates. Sorry, some business plan templates have one page and some have 140 pages. How do I know which one I should start with?
Sure. The very first thing that I would ask is how much do you know about your industry? Because, like Jesse mentioned, right, if you've never worked in the industry that you're starting this business in, I would recommend uh, delving into a longer business plan where you actually have to do, that market research to learn more about the industry you're going into. However, if you do have experience and you've worked in it before or you know what you're doing, a shorter business plan will be just as good. It just has to really have, the three components that I mentioned earlier, like the marketing side, the financial side, and the legal slash like growth plan. Because as long as you can have those three, I think those are like the most important part of your business. And then it also depends what the business plan will be used for, because some lenders, for example, if you're a startup and you're looking for a loan, some lenders will require that you have a business plan and some will not.
Mm,
Right. But I think as long as the business plan is something that works for you, and will help you like plan things out, I think it's a good business plan. And also, and not another plug for a coaching hub, but for example, here at AOF, if you have a business plan that you've already created and you want some feedback on it, that's something that we can help with as well. So, don't feel shy. Feel free to reach out to us.
yes, I love that. Jesse, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think I completely agree with Gladys. I tend to work really well I just sit down and start writing and see what comes up. I describe it as, having sort of a handful of Skittles, dropping them on the table and then start putting them in color order. That's kind of how my brain works for some reason. So for me, when I wrote my first business plan, and I think I'm probably on, iteration number 10, and not because anybody needed it, but because I refer back to it all the time. It's more of, let me get everything I'm thinking down on paper and then go through it and, delete things that didn't make sense, expand on things that did make sense, and see what it inspires in me to think about. But again, that's just a really personal, creative process that I use. I think starting from a structured place is really great too. You can Google great business plans. And you could even, you can use, I'm surprised we haven't mentioned it once today, but you can use AI to create a template business plan for yourself, give it all the information of what you're trying to accomplish, and then let it spit out a business plan for you. Don't use that business plan. That's not my recommendation, but it's a guide, because I think a lot of people just struggle on where to start. Right. So if they have just a starting point, I think that's a really great place, but also a great place is Google and finding some really good ones that are maybe in your industry. So there are lots of tools out there. Of course, use a free resource like Gladys and the Hub. What the information they can provide is so valuable because they've seen so many of them. Right. So you've got a great place to start there. But yeah, I would recommend, knowing how your brain works and then going from there. But yeah, that would be what I would add.
I love that. And I do see some other questions in the chat. And I know we're getting close to the top of the hour, but I didn't want to miss the chance to mention that Jesse is super passionate about building community and being able to connect with other entrepreneurs. He has been doing this through probably one of the most difficult times in history to start a business, a cafe right before the pandemic. So we've actually dropped his business website and his email. So if you want to reach out to him, if you have questions and you'd like to learn more about his journey, he has graciously provided that. So please take a look in the chat for that. You know, respectfully use that and give him some time. There's a lot of folks here today. So as we are wrapping up, we're at the top of the hour. I feel like this transition, we could talk about it for many, many more hours, but I really want to thank Gladys and Jesse for being just so engaged in the chat, in providing all of the expertise that you both have. I feel like it's been a really helpful conversation. And to those of you who have taken the time out of your busy days to make time for this, I hope you were able to get something out of this that you can apply and move forward and maybe step into entrepreneurship this year fully. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you all for joining, and we'll see you next time. Bye.